So, John, it's been what? It's been a
A
year and a
while now,
half
man.
since you've been on Born
Yeah,
to Battle.
yeah, yeah. It's been a while.
How is
Year and a
everything?
half is like a whole new world, right?
It doesn't seem like a year and a half though. With COVID and everybody working from home, it just seems like
Oh, another
2020.
life. Oh,
Yeah.
forget it. It's crazy.
So how is everything? How you been?
Hey, good. I mean, we've had a lot going on. We've been fortunate. We've been in a position to respond as aggressively as we've had, and we've had terrific support both from VA and Congress to get the funding we need
Yeah.
to deliver critical services.
Yeah. Back then, I think in that episode we talked about the huge surplus of funding you guys got for Congress
Yeah,
and what you guys were
yeah.
doing. So, are is there going to be any kind of like now that funding's not COVID funding and it's kind of going back to normal? Is there kind of like a whiplash
So
effect a little bit?
we'll see. We've got funding through the next couple of years. So we've gotten about an additional $1 billion in funding between CARES funds and the American Rescue Plan. And
Yeah,
that'll take us out for a couple of years. What happens after that? We'll have to wait and see on the appropriation process.
gotcha. It seems like that's a yearly fight for you guys.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Fortunately, it's a good fight because the veterans do get bipartisan support. I think there's a real acknowledgement that they should be put front and center for any kind of help and assistance. These guys have earned it. These gals have earned it.
yeah.
And generally that assistance has been forthcoming.
I mean, you're in a good spot. It's veterans and homelessness. Like,
Yep. Yep.
why would you want to mess with that?
Exactly. Exactly. And we have a program that works. We've been able to demonstrate that. We have proven outcomes. We publish our outcomes, transparent.
Yeah,
And I think that also helps.
very good. Back then when we talked about the CARES Act funding, like we just talked about for supportive services for veteran families program. That's the program you're the director of.
Yes.
Um, Now we said we'd come back for a full benefits breakdown for the SSV. I'm going to use SSVF now. I just want to get
Yes.
the
That's
acronym
good.
out there,
Yep.
or the definition out there. So here we are. This is the benefits breakdown of the SSVF program.
Mhm.
Real quick, and I think we covered it back then, but for those that may have not have heard the first conversation that we had, can you give a quick overview of what SSVF is?
Sure. So the focus of SSVF is it's really an acknowledgement that for most people who find themselves in a housing crisis, either they become homeless or they're at imminent risk for homelessness, it's a time limited situation. They're facing a financial crisis due to environmental or social factors. And what they really need help with is help navigating that crisis, whether that's financial assistance, help with housing, legal assistance, childcare, um, access to healthcare resources, a whole host of things that SSVF grantees can offer, benefits assistance. We can step in, provide that assistance, help that family get through that crisis, and then back on their feet and independent. Most folks who face a homelessness crisis have been housed for long periods of time or not needing long-term assistance, and that's where SSVF steps in. There are other programs within VA, HUD-VASH, the most prominent one,
Yeah.
where for folks who do face long-term needs for support, there are those kinds of assistance available. But for the bulk of folks who don't need that long-term support, that's where SSVF comes in.
Gotcha. Yeah, and literally the last benefits breakdown was on the HUD-VASH program with Megan Deal. So if you get a chance, if you're listening to this, take a listen to that one uh,
Absolutely.
as well. So with your program, and let me know if I get this wrong. These are grants to local community nonprofits to
Exactly.
support the fight against homelessness, right?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And one of the great things about that involvement is because those local nonprofits are embedded in the community, they know the community. It's not like the VA with our 2,000-mile long screwdriver from Washington trying to fix something. We really rely on the people with local knowledge, and those local community providers are perfect partners for us.
Yeah. No. Every year you put out a news release talking about how much has been given out per fiscal year to these local nonprofits, and then you actually list them, by state. Like, hey,
Yep,
these are who we're giving money to. Call these folks. I
absolutely.
think if I was looking at fiscal year 2022, it's over $415 million to over 260 organizations.
Exactly.
Uh, you cover all 50 states and territories, right?
All 56 states, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, District of Columbia, and Guam.
Gotcha. What makes this has always been my question with SSVF. What makes a non-profit qualified to participate in the program uh, and receiving that money?
Mhm. So we have a rigorous application process. And in fact, if you look at our website, when we do have what's called a notice of funding opportunity, and we expect to have one towards the end of this calendar year, it really describes what folks need to do to apply for these grants and what they need to do to win them. And in fact, you can see our scoring system, which is publicly available on our website. If you just go to SSVF, you Google SSVF, you'll find it. And that scoring system really rewards people with deep experience working with this population. Do you have experience working with veterans? Do you have a good knowledge of the homeless population? Are you strongly linked into the community? Just what I was describing before. We're looking for partners who know the community, who know how to secure local benefits and employment and housing. Those are the things that we really need our local nonprofits to help our veterans find and connect to.
Gotcha. How can a how can a nonprofit apply? You said there's a notice of
None. It's called a NOFO. That's a nice, terrible, huh? Great VA
no
acronym.
faux show. Yeah.
It's actually a federal acronym, but it's a notice of funding opportunity. And we also send these announcements out through our community partners or an advocate. So National Coalition of Homeless Veterans will, for instance, send out a huge listserv announcement to their uh, organizations that they work with, and others as well. But that's probably the
Gotcha.
one that's best known. National Alliance and Homelessness, of course, and others will send out these. So we try to get a broad dissemination of these announcements when they happen, and
Yeah.
they're often open to existing grantees, but sometimes we also open them to new applicants. So we try to get a new mix, create some competition,
Yeah,
and
of
try to
course.
get resources into areas where it's needed.
Does that not happen every year?
So in the past year, we didn't do it. We thought because of the COVID crisis, it was important to have continuity,
Okay.
and there was a lot of change going on within the program in terms of the resources we were marshaling out. We wanted to make sure grantees had the capacity to quickly respond to the health emergency. And we felt that we needed to use existing grantees who are already operational, who could react very quickly to the crisis. So we did not open it up to new grantees in the past year. That's going to change now for the next round.
Gotcha. So yeah, that was the injection for the COVID funding. I
Yeah,
CARES Act. That totally makes sense. So that's good. That's going to be you're going to be open up for other nonprofits to apply, and we'll make sure to put the SSVF website in the show notes and on the blog on blogs.va.gov of this episode. So if you get a chance,
excellent.
check
Thanks.
that out.
That's a big help. That's a big help.
Absolutely. Um, so within VA, and we like I said, we covered HUD VASH in the last benefits breakdown, which kind of covers some programs with them, like some of these programs. But are there any other types of, I guess, eviction protections, homelessness avoidance, rapid rehousing resources for veterans within VA in general?
So I'm actually very happy you asked that, Tanner, because it lets me segue into some of the partnerships we have with other federal agencies.
Okay.
So SSVF's focus is twofold. One, we want to rapidly rehouse families who are homeless. And I want to underline families because the fact is 20% of our program participants are dependent children. Veterans are often parts of families, just like you and I,
Yeah.
and when they become homeless, their family comes homeless. So we are able to serve the entire family. It's one of the unique features of SSVF. That might mean providing childcare. So if you're a single mom trying to go to work, you have childcare for your children to allow you to do that. So we're
Yeah.
able to work with the entire family.
That's
So
awesome.
the rapid rehousing piece focuses on homeless veterans. And then our second mission, which has become more important now with this health emergency, is prevention. Our focus is homeless prevention, not eviction prevention, because the reality is most folks who get evicted don't become homeless. They they either find new places to stay, they stay with family, friends, and so forth. So most of them don't become homeless. So there, it's important for us to partner and make sure our grantees are able to connect those veterans who are facing eviction but not homelessness to other resources. An important resource that Congress created as a result of the health emergency is called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. And in fact, if your listeners were just to Google U.S. rental assistance, you would find it. It would be the first listing. It's a Treasury program, and over $46 billion has been set aside for persons, 46 billion. Yeah, it's a
With a
lot of
B.
money with a B,
Wow.
lots of money to prevent evictions as opposed to prevent homelessness. So this is a tremendous resource. So we certainly have worked very closely with our grantees to make sure that that information is disseminated.
Yeah.
But an important follow-on piece and something we have just recently launched within SSVF is something known as the shallow subsidy. So what's great about these eviction prevention or homeless prevention programs is that yes, they help you pay your back rent that's owed, but what happens going forward? These families still can't afford the rent, and as people have probably generally aware of, newspapers are filled with stories these days about huge rental spikes.
Yeah.
Rent increases are going up. There's just this growing gap between those who can afford, that their rent is just greatly accelerating beyond their ability to pay it. How do they make that happen? How do they pay their rent if they're a low income worker? And that's a real challenge.
And that's a whole separate episode. I mean, I'm from the West Coast personally.
Oh, so
You saw
you
it.
know it firsthand.
Yeah,
That's a
you saw it
mess.
from Hawaii. Then you saw it in LA and San Francisco, and then my hometown is Seattle. And there's a lot of factors,
Right.
a lot of
Seattle.
factors.
Yeah.
A lot of outside. You can you can go in a whole direction with that. But yeah, no, you're definitely seeing that in a lot of places.
So what we've done is we've created a new initiative called a shallow subsidy. And what that does is it guarantees up to 35%. We're about to change it. The new regulations are probably going to come out in about a month or so. We're hoping, again, touch wood, which will increase the rental subsidy to 50%. That subsidy helps close the gap. So if you're getting 35 or 50% of your rent paid every month, you now all of a sudden that housing, which has become unaffordable, is affordable again. And one of the neat things about shallow subsidy is the subsidy is fixed for 2 years, no matter what. So most of the time, when you get a subsidy from the federal government, HUD, VASH, anything else, as your income goes up, the value of the subsidy goes down. So what we're trying to do is incentivize you to increase your income because we're telling you it's almost like a guaranteed income. Though no matter what, for the next 2 years, you're going to get this subsidy paid for your rent. So go ahead and work to increase your income or your benefits because every extra dollar you make or bring in, you keep. And we have a strong partnership with the Department of Labor, who has been great with working with us. The Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program is an important part of that. But the Department of Labor in a number of cities is co-enrolling those veterans engaged in shallow subsidy in their Homeless Veterans Reintegration Program, because that 2 year subsidy program, we could get people hopefully trained to make more money, to have a better income, and eventually be free of the risk of homelessness.
Gotcha. And so those shallow subsidies, they last for 2 years.
2 years, and they can potentially be renewed.
Okay.
So it's
Okay.
different from HUD VASH. What HUD VASH does is they're really looking at a longer term period, people with high clinical needs.
Yeah.
We're looking at people who are frankly just mostly just poor and maybe need help building their income. And our focus is a different focus. So we're looking at an intermediate term subsidy, which will give people enough of a runway to build some resources, build some either skills or other sources of income. So at the end of the 2 years, they can be standing on their own. Or if not, we find other resources for them. So it's more of an intermediate term subsidy that addressing issues of poverty and the
Yeah.
issue of an income gap or the affordability gap between income and rental costs.
But those rents stay the same. You think about that. You think, okay, there's 2 years, then another 2 years. At what point
Well,
can we really start closing that gap? But
yeah, yeah, and
that's
that's why it's so important to increase their income because you're right; those
that's a
rents are
complete
not they're going to keep going up.
yeah, and that's a completely separate discussion of why those rents are, especially on the West Coast, why those rents
Yeah,
are so high.
yeah.
Um, you talked about the federal eviction moratoriums, and 46. I was you talked about the Treasury, $46 billion. I can see the Treasury being the one that has the not only the funds but the kind of the lay of the land, because you're looking at not only eviction moratoriums, you're looking at foreclosure moratoriums, you're looking
Yep.
at the forbearance periods that we had during COVID. All of those will be coming to an end.
Mhm.
Is maybe and maybe it's the Treasury, and maybe that's why there's $46 billion at the Treasury. But from maybe your eye test, has there been some thought into lining up these ends of moratoriums and evictions and foreclosures to try to take the least amount of damage overall for everyone, because those are all linked. in a
You
way,
are
aren't they?
absolutely right. You've absolutely got it, Tanner. I mean,
Yeah.
that is really the crux of our concerns. So all these moratoriums have ended now. Can we make sure that these veterans get the assistance they need? And that's why it's so important. And shows like yours are so important for getting the information out. The resources are there. These
Yeah.
programs are stood up, but unfortunately, a lot of people still don't know that they're eligible for these. And if you're not, most veterans, they don't think of themselves as typically being in need of these kinds of resources. Sure, there have been many veterans helped by homeless services, but when you
Yeah.
think of the number of veterans that are out there who, for the first time, are facing real economic dislocation because of COVID, never thought of accessing these resources and have no idea how to do it.
Yeah.
And so it's really by getting in contact through outreach and quite frankly, it's going to be the media, things like your program that people will tune in on and go, oh, whether it's me or, my brother Billy or my friend down the street who I know is a veteran who's having trouble, that's how they're going to find out about it. And that's how they'll learn about these kinds of resources. And hopefully we can connect to them and prevent these tragedies.
I hope a lot of my colleagues listen to this and go, you know what, that John guy, let's get him on. Let's get him on more shows, more veteran shows. So these more. So it sounds like the shallow subsidy is kind of like a gap in case there is a gap between the eviction moratorium and the foreclosures, and that's a good resource. The $46 billion at the Treasury. What is that program called again? The one at the Treasury?
It's the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. It's
Emergency
shortened to ERAP is the common acronym for that, ERAP. But if you just Google U.S. rental assistance, the first thing will show up is the Treasury program.
Okay.
So that's probably the easiest thing. It's actually in English.
Yeah, that's a completely important one. I want to get at there. Emergency Rental Assistance Program,
Yeah.
ERAP.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we covered a lot in a short amount of time, relatively short amount of time for this show. But
Mhm.
John, is there anything that I may have missed or didn't
Sure.
ask? Yeah.
Sure. There are a couple things I would like to highlight. So first, any of your listeners, if you just Google SSVF, it'll bring you right to our webpage. And you can see right on our webpage is a list of all of our providers, all the locations, all the contact information. So you can use that to find a local provider. We also have the 800 number that the VA has for accessing resources. You go to va.gov. You can either use that 800 number. You'll see it's va.gov/homeless. You'll see the 800 number. You'll see a chat function as well. If you prefer that, you can contact VA to find a whole list of homeless resources. So I think it's important if folks bookmark those things. So again, Google SSVF, you can find us. Google VA homeless, and you'll again find all these resources. Those are the principal contacts for people, not just directly. Again, if your brother or your sister is a veteran who may need that assistance, if you have a friend or a neighbor, all those kinds of information dissemination is hugely helpful.
Yeah, back in Olympia, Washington, my cousin, he's like, I pass by this veteran every day who's homeless, and we talk, and he's like, I buy him sandwiches, and he works in construction. He's like, I buy him sandwiches, and we have lunch together, and I always tell him he should
Awesome.
get off the street. He's like, but I don't know how to help him. Tanner, you work at the VA. What can you? So I'm like, okay, I got it, guy. His name's John. So again, what's you mentioned all these. What's the first thing my cousin Ben should do?
You can start off by calling the VA 800 number. It's 877-428-3838. And that is the toll-free number, 24/7 answered. And they can put you in touch with any homeless resource wherever you live. So if your cousin, let's just say he's in Seattle, was given that number, they would put him in touch with the Seattle VA Medical Center, who would connect him to whatever the appropriate resource is, whether that's SSVF, a DASH, or another resource. So that, and again, that is a toll-free number, 24/7. You can get somebody connecting to you. And I think that's probably the easiest way to do it. And then the second thing are those websites I mentioned for people who are not as comfortable on the phone, who rather use a chat function. That can be done as well. And that would be, of course, done online. I also want to mention one other service that we've had. We know that for a lot of folks, they don't want to enter the homeless system. They don't want to go, not only in the homeless system, some people don't want to go to the VA. So that's another option that SSVF offers. You don't have to go into a VA to actually get enrolled in SSVF. In fact, SSVF uses a system. It's another acronym. your viewers don't have to know about it. It's called Squares. But what the system allows, it's an online system where our grantees can go on their computer. You give them your name, some identifying information, which your personal information, and they can immediately establish your eligibility. You don't have to go to a VA. They can do that on the spot, determine your eligibility, and enroll you on the spot. You never have to go to a VA. You never have to go to any kind of federal office. So that's another appealing thing for some of our veterans who are not necessarily comfortable with doing that. And also, what's not widely known still is that SSVF can serve some veterans who are not eligible for VA healthcare. So for VA healthcare, you generally have to be honorably discharged. In SSVF, you could have a general discharge or other than honorable discharge, pretty much anything other than a dishonorable discharge, and still be served. So that is something, again, not generally known, but allows you to go to a grantee, allows you to get services, and we encourage our grantees, many of our grantees can do this, is that the day you show up for services is the day you're enrolled. There's no huge delay to get in. You don't have to carry your DD-214 with you. Again, just knowing some personal information and some basic ID, hopefully, is enough to get you started.
Outstanding information. John, send me all those links. We'll put them
I will
all in the
absolutely
show
do it.
notes. We'll put them all
Absolutely.
in the blog on blogs.va.gov. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate you. And we're out.
Great. Thanks so much, Tanner. Appreciate it.
We gotta get 'em one way or the other. Machine gunner, fight bullets fly, day and night rain. Simplify till we die, another campaign. My desk is a rock where the drug lords cut up millions. My pen is a 7.62 round that'll cut 'em down in an instant. Point, click, pull the trigger to the tune of falling brass. Full benefits and a purple heart and a Russian-made bullet in my back. Raining down lead, punching that clock. Get 'em boys, I'm laying down cover. Machine gunner, fight bullets fly, day and night rain. Simplify, do or die, another campaign. Here we go, lock and load, 0331, lug 1,000 rounds, and I ain't bringing back one.